Ambassador Christoph Heusgen.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome you all and to open the 59th Munich Security Conference. I have taken over from Wolfgang Ischinger. Wolfgang, who has chaired the Munich Security Conference for 14 years. He has made what the Munich Security Conference is today, and I would invite you to welcome with me Wolfgang. On the 20th of February 2022, the Munich Security Conference last year closed. We had a glimpse of hope that Vladimir Putin would be impressed by the unity the international community demonstrated here at the Munich Security Conference. We all know what happened. Vladimir Putin committed a breach of civilization. It's the first time since World War II that in Europe one country denied the right of existence of another country and started an all-out war. 1 year later, there are over 14 million Ukrainians displaced. There are 10,000s of children, women and men who have been killed, injured, tortured, raped, abducted. And I invite you to have a look at the Russia War Crimes exhibition, which we present here on the ground floor. But Ukraine is not the only place where people are suffering, and I list just a few. We have Myanmar and the Rohingya. We have Afghanistan, Syria, Iran, Ethiopia, Haiti. And let me remind you of the alarming report the High Commissioner for Human Rights, the former Chilean President Michelle Bachelet, presented about the fate of the Uyghurs in Xinjiang. In light of the war crimes, the crimes against humanity, the crimes of aggression that have been committed, we will dedicate this afternoon, after the opening session, the first panel later this afternoon on the theme of accountability. How do we prevent impunity? How do we strengthen the International Criminal Court? How do we create a special tribunal on the crime of aggression? Ladies and gentlemen, the many conflicts that I mentioned demonstrate that the UN Charter is under attack, that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is under attack, that the rules-based international order is under attack. We witness in Ukraine not a battle between East and West, but not a battle between NATO and Russia or European Union and Russia, but we witness a battle which is between the rule of law and the law of the strongest. This is a battle which concerns the whole world. To defend this global order, we, of course, need the transatlantic community. But we also need the Global South. This is why the Munich Security Conference this year puts a spotlight on the Global South. On the first panel tomorrow morning, we will dedicating the discussion on the Global South to listen also to their concerns. We have a record number of representatives from the Global South, from Mongolia to the Dominican Republic, from Namibia to Colombia, from Ghana to Brazil. I would like to welcome all representatives here from Latin America, from Africa, and from Asia. Of course, this conference concentrates on Putin's war against Ukraine. We have a record number of representatives from the Ukrainian government, from the Ukrainian parliament, from Ukrainian civil society, and I'm very happy that President Zelensky will join us in a moment. But I would like all of you to welcome the brave women and men of Ukraine. The international community will hopefully use the Munich Security Conference to coordinate the support for the independence, for freedom, for democracy, and for the dignity of Ukraine. And when we support the Ukrainians and their fight for freedom, we know that they are fighting for our freedom in Europe, for our freedom globally. I'm very happy that Chancellor Olaf Scholz and President Emmanuel Macron will be the first respondents today, and I would like to warmly welcome the German-French couple here. We will, of course, discuss the European security architecture, and I'm very happy that we have so many representatives from all over Europe. Very thankful that you all have made it from all corners of Europe. I also would like to welcome the representatives from international organizations, from the UN family, from the Secretary General of the OSCE and the Chairman in Office of the OSCE, one of the last organizations where Russia is still participating. We will highlight in this conference again, or we will take a holistic approach to security. We will look at climate and security, and the biggest sin that Vladimir Putin commits is that he is right now in a situation, we are in a situation, we have to find billions of dollars to support Ukraine, to buy weapons, to defend democracy, the rule of law, money that would be much better spent on the fund for loss and damage, for helping all partners to work to fight the effects of climate change. This is the most important threat that we face, and I would like all of you to look at the speech that George Soros gave yesterday in front of 1,600 young Munich students at the Munich University. We will highlight this conference the role of women. We are happy, I'm happy to announce that we are in the podiums, as I promised last year, that we'll have 50% women sitting on our podiums during this conference. As Munich Security Conference, we are launching a women's parliamentarian program, and we continue, and I would like to welcome a new generation, so to speak, of Munich young leaders. Let me end where the MSC, the Munich Security Conference, 60 years ago started. It started as a transatlantic conference. Ewald von Kleist, 60 years ago, had with him, and these pictures were not nice, seen from today's perspective, in a smoke-filled room, 80 men, basically 80 men who enjoyed it. And I don't know if Jim Jones is here, one of the long-time former national security advisor, who told me that the Americans love to come here because they could discuss but also then celebrate Munich Fasching. We have the largest ever Congress delegation in history. We expect the US Vice President, who I have seen, Minister President Söder, you welcomed the Vice President, and we have many members of the Biden administration. I would ask you to warmly welcome our friends from the United States, and I would like also to add Canada, who have been fantastic friends over the year to the Munich Security Conference. Thank you for coming. We Europeans know how much we owe you. At the same time, we Europeans also know that we have to do more. And in this context, I would like to welcome the new German Defense Minister, Boris Pistorius. You have a tall task in front of you. Finally, I would like, and he will be surprised, I would like to honor one particular person, my former boss, Javier Solana. Javier Solana is a Spanish socialist, Minister of Culture and Foreign Affairs of his country, Spain, NATO Secretary General, first EU High Representative for whom I had the pleasure to work. At 80 years, Javier, you can proudly look back on your life, a life dedicated to democracy, freedom, and the defense of humanity. Javier. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank our partners, the mayor of all of our partners. I want to thank the mayor of Munich, Dieter Reiter. I want to thank the Minister President of Bavaria, Markus Söder. Thank you very much for all you have done for the Munich Security Conference over years. I would also like your cabinet members. We feel very much welcome in Munich, and we will, of course, stay here. We'll stay in the Hotel Bayerischer Hof. I must admit we were not successful to have it grow in size. So I lost a few friends over time who we were not able to accommodate. I would like also to thank the Bayerischer Rundfunk as host broadcaster. And last but not least, I would like to thank the people of Munich and thank them for their support and their tolerance. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now ask for your attention. Please listen to Samson Tsoy, a British pianist of Russian and Korean origin. He will play for us Schubert's Impromptu No. 2. His music is played to honor and to remember the victims of violence and natural catastrophes. Samson.
Ladies and gentlemen, I greet all of you and would like to remedy one injustice right away. This panel discussion is called David on the Dnipro. I consider it as a rightful respect to Ukraine and to everything our people are doing. But this year, determination was shown on different banks, and not only of the Dnipro, Spree, and Seine, Thames, and Potomac, Vistula, and Tiber. David is now all of us. He is a whole free world. David is everyone who left that there is no alternative but to defeat Goliath, who came to destroy our life. Being David is fighting, and we are fighting. Being David is having a sling to win. We do not have yet the David's sling from Israel, but I believe it is just temporarily. Now I would like to thank for the powerful support and mighty weapons. I thank Olaf and Emmanuel who are present here on this panel, and I thank all our partners present here in Munich, the United States, Britain, all the countries of the EU, and all from the whole world. I'm grateful to everyone who gives the sling to Ukrainian David, thanks to which Russian Goliath has already started to lose his ground. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. We saw it last year, and he will definitely fall already this year. We can make it, all of us together, just as David did. We can make sure that there is no alternative to our victory, but then there should be no alternative to our determination, to the determination of all of us on Dnipro, and on Spree, on Seine, on Thames, on Potomac, and Vistula, on Tiber, Danube, and Jordan, and everywhere, in every part of the world where freedom is valued more than the mercy of a tyrant. Last year, when I was here in Munich at the conference, I was looking for such common determination. Ukraine was clearly telling the world, we will fight for ourselves if Russia starts a full-scale war. I wanted to hear from the world, Ukraine, we will be with you. Unfortunately, I heard it only after Russian missiles struck our land, already after the Russian tanks started moving, already after Putin destroyed all alternatives, leaving just one. Who will win, he or us? In fact, you have already responded with the name of this conference's panel discussion. Goliath has no chances. But unfortunately, he has a potential. Unfortunately, he tries to buy additional time for his aggression, trading with the world. Unfortunately, he can still destroy many lives, many. That is why we need to hurry up. We need the speed of our agreements, speed of our delivery to strengthen our sling, speed of decisions to limit Russian potential. There is no alternative to speed, because it is the speed that the life depends on. Delay has always been and still is a mistake. While we negotiate how to strengthen our defense with modern tanks, the Kremlin is thinking about ways to strangle Moldova. While we are trying to convince that Ukraine needs modern combat aircraft, the Kremlin has already convinced the Iranian regime. The result is not only lethal Iranian drones in Ukrainian skies, but also something with which the Kremlin paid for it? Are you sure it's just money? Or maybe the world will face the enriched Iranian regime? And to what extent? 90%, 92 or 100%? And I'm sure none of us wants to let the region of Middle East and the Gulf to taste it, while we spent weeks to agree on new sanctions against Russia. The terrorist state is looking for ways to adapt to the restrictions already in place through parallel imports, shadow fleet of tankers and the like. Where shall we see the impact of this illegal profit of Russia? In the efforts to corrupt your political systems and international institutions, in attempts to destabilize your social life, and in disinformation campaigns against your people, in escalation in those regions that are sensitive to you. What awaits, for example, Libya, Mali, or Central African Republic while Moscow had the power? What awaits Syria? Nothing good, just like many other nations. So you will have no rest as well. So it's not just about Ukraine. The point is that Goliath must lose. And there is no alternative to this, because the Kremlin can break the security and peace of all who are now represented here in Munich. Delayed decisions of the world are a resource Putin's dictatorship lives on. It's been that way for years. The longer the talks about the enlargement of the European Union dragged on, the more destructiveness the Kremlin brought to the then gray zone between the European Union and Russia. The louder it was said that it was necessary to wait before Ukraine was allowed to enter NATO's open door, the more aggressive Russian policy became. The longer the silence on Crimea, on the global agenda lasted, the more vigorous Russian revanchism became. And the more the world argued over what sanctions and when to impose against Russia, the more shameless the Kremlin's ambitions became. The longer we in Ukraine, in Europe, in the world had no unity, the more illusions Russia had. Now all this is being corrected. Just like last year, I now propose to act immediately. But unlike last year, now I have the most convincing argument, our achievements. Can we deter Russian strikes? Yes. Can we protect our cities from Russian missiles? Definitely. Can we liberate our land? There are 1,891 proofs of this. That is exactly how many cities, towns, villages we managed to liberate from the Russian occupation. Can we restore security in the Black Sea region and food security in the world? The Black Sea Grain Initiative and the humanitarian initiative Grain from Ukraine are convincing. Is it time for Ukraine to be a full-fledged part of the European Union? Most Europeans support membership for Ukraine. We have already gained the status of a candidate country. We are already preparing to start membership negotiations. We are already united with the European economy, logistics, and energy. There is no alternative to Ukrainian victory. There is no alternative to Ukraine in the EU. There is no alternative to Ukraine in NATO. There is no alternative to our unity. Hence, there is no and should not be any alternative to completely get rid of Russian aggression. to liberate the land, to liberate people, because every city, town and village that remains under occupation means people staying in captivity. May people be the subject of compromise? No. We have to liberate Ukraine and Europe, because when the Russian weapon shoot at us, it is already pointed at our neighbors. May Europe be the subject of compromise? No. We have to liberate from Russia's aggressive potential every international institution and every sphere of the world economy, because only then there will be a chance for freedom to pass through our border further to the east. May freedom be the subject of compromise? No. And it's a rock solid no. I'm confident that we can gain victory not only over Putin, but also over Putins. Not only over Putins in Russia, but all around the world. Wouldn't this be a proof of the power of the idea of freedom? It will definitely be. Ladies and gentlemen, determination is never abstract. David defeated Goliath not by the power of conversation, but by the power of these actions, by the courage and sling. Courage is what we have. There is enough of it, not only in Ukraine, but in our entire coalition of victory. The sling should get stronger right now, so that the next year we would gather here in Munich for the first security post-war conference under the condition of free Ukraine, free Europe, free world. Olaf, Emmanuel, all our friends and I, Olaf, Emmanuel, yeah, all our friends, I think you've got me right. I thank you. Thank you very much for your attention. You, Davids of the free world, we united Davids shall prevail over Putins scattered all over the world. Glory to everyone who is now on the battlefield. Slava Ukraini! Thank you very much.
Mr. President, thank you very much for your words. When we asked you some time ago if you were to attend the Munich Security Conference, you said, well, I'm going to be there in person when the war is over. So we hope to welcome you, as you indicated, next year here in Munich. But on the same question, if I may, Mr. President, President Putin clearly counts on the fatigue of the international community and the fatigue of your country, of decrease in resilience. He believes that Russia has more staying power than Ukraine. Do you share his view? And he's going to respond in Ukrainian.
Питання. Ви знаєте, я в принципі не поділяю точки зору президента Путіна.
President Putin, I don't share anything with him. I do realize all the risks. I understand that they are there, great risks, and really he's interested in making sure that support is hindered or getting slow. Not talking about weapons, we're talking about all aspects of support, including financial support and political support. on all floors, on all platforms, including the UN and all the other various platforms, political support in Africa, for example, and the vision of what he's looking at of unity. So he does this last thing he wants is for the world to be united vis-a-vis Ukraine, and he has been working hard and trying to wedge between individual members of the European Union, indeed. So they don't want us to be resilient enough, as opposed to what we have demonstrated for the last year. And of course, fatigue, there is such thing as fatigue. There's a variety of issues and challenges, including energy, climate, whatever, inflation. And he is trying to pull them all together, lump them on the world, lump them together with the sanction policy to make them feel tired. But a lot of things happened because he started the war in the first place. So we don't have to be tired. We need to keep repeating to society and to each other, and which is the right thing to do, to keep in mind who actually started the war, why the war was started. It's obvious that Ukraine is not going to be his last stop. He's going to continue his movement all the way, I don't know, just including all other states that at some point in time were part of what? Of the Soviet bloc. So, and it's easy to understand what he's driving at. I said speed is crucial. Exactly. Let me. And he wants the world to slow down, because speed determines our prospects to overcome, to prevail. So he is afraid of his own domestic situation. He is losing himself to his own people, as a matter of fact. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Now, we have seen that Russia is trying for some days already to start on kind of offensive. My question, how do you think this will continue, and are you concerned that maybe Belarus will join in and Lukashenko will join Putin in attacking your country?
Well, with regard to this offensive story, so everything is not that as complicated. They're not just, leaders of genius. I'm talking about the political military leadership of Russia. They are trying to try the waters, to try to see, to identify some vulnerabilities in our defense system, and they're looking for support. So therefore, they target civilian facilities, energy networks, and those strikes are not accidental. They are trying to provoke chaos, and they have been working on this, and they've been looking for any vulnerabilities on our side. So they're looking at the southern part of our country, and non-stop. They have been actually operating non-stop all the way through across, along the whole year. And they are amassed basically in the eastern, southern parts, but let me remind you, about 40,000 Russian soldiers fled. They were just running away from the Kherson area all the way out to the other side of the river because they lost Kherson, but still they want to keep concentrated force somewhere in the east, because this is their number one area, and they are striking civilian facilities, like I said, housing areas for a reason. They want to oust residents for them to be able to occupy, to put the foot on the ground. Speaking of the Donbass, unfortunately, the infrastructure has been completely destroyed, and as Hitler used to operate during the Second World War, right, relying on aviation, shelling and bombing, right? So this is what Russia has been doing. So no surprises. We are fully aware of their tactics and strategies, and hopefully we are going to to be supported by your allies, which will fill us with conviction. And, well, at the end of the day, the Donbass will end up being destroyed completely, but I'm sure that we'll be able to restore everything, to renew everything, to rebuild everything. So we need to save our human resources as well. This is because our largest values, highest values. With regard to the second part of the question about Belarus, well, our understanding as of today is as follows. At this point in time, such likelihood is pretty low for Belarus to join Russia because this is not easy to involve Belarusian soldiers because in principle we understand Belarusians do not want to fight against Ukraine. We have some analytical data that show an 80% support of, not going against Ukraine, and this is going to be a large mistake. Had Lukashenko been doing this, so it would have been really a huge history-making mistake, because at some point in time, Russia has been using their airports, airfields, to shell and bombard Ukraine. Maybe this has been done without Minsk's support. But if they do it voluntarily, if they actually join in forces, then this will be much worse for them. They will immediately become a part of Putin's aggressive equation, right? And they will be subject to future tribunals. They will have to face the need to fund restoration activities in Ukraine. So this is going to be a major mistake, and hopefully Belarus will fall short of doing that, and they do not have enough forces for that, not resources. And if they do attack us, so chances are that their soldiers will fall and will remain in our soil without being able to return. So we are defending ourselves, and they're thinking of attacking us.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. My last question is about the future of your own country. You have demonstrated within Ukrainian society a lot of internal solidarity. My question is, will this unity, which I think is very, very important, will this continue after the war, and also on if I may say this, on the endemic corruption that we witnessed in your country before? Do you think that this endemic corruption will be pulled out by its roots for good?
All right. There's no such thing as in-depth corruption in Ukraine. A lot of things, of course, have been put bare, have come up to surface with this war, against the backdrop of this war. I agree with what you're saying, and some part of our people have stayed with the occupiers. But okay, rewinding forward, the post-war Ukraine, I'm sure that Ukraine will be able to cope with corruption because we are conducting a series of reforms, and we have a specialist anti-corruption agency, and I'm about to appoint a new leader, and next month, in fact, this process will be completed. So regardless of the war, we are reforming ourselves. We are fighting corruption, and but again, during the war, of course, corruption is always there, because war is sometimes used as a source of illicit incomes, as you know. But hopefully this is going to end pretty much soon, and we'll cope with corruption after that.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I think I speak for everybody when I thank you for your intervention this afternoon, and we wish you and your people good luck, and we'll do everything also here at the Munich Security Conference to really support behind your cause. You are defending our freedom as well. So thank you very much for being with us. Good luck to you, Mr. President.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Good luck and peace. Thank you for support.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I ask you to keep on your headphones, because now it's a great pleasure and honor to welcome for the second time in a row to the Munich Security Conference Chancellor Olaf Scholz.
Super. Sehr geehrter Herr Botschafter Heusgen, meine Damen und Herren.
Heusgen, ladies and gentlemen, I'm certain I speak on behalf of everyone when, after this speech of President Zelensky, I first of all respond to him. Volodymyr, we would have loved to have you with us today, because Ukraine belongs here, at our side, in a free and united Europe. However, we understand where your place has to be at this time, has to be, in Kiev, working tirelessly for your country. And for that, we here in Munich wish you continued strength and confidence.
Extend a very special, very warm welcome to the Vice President of the United States. Thank you for joining the conference once again, I may add. It is an honor to have you here with us, along with so many colleagues from the US Senate, the House of Representatives, and the administration. Welcome to all of you to Munich. Ihnen, lieber Herr Ischinger, war es immer ein Anliegen, dass
Mr. Ischinger, it was always important to you to ensure that this conference was not just about giving speeches, but that the participants entered into a dialogue with each other. And Mr. Heusgen, I know that you set great store by that too. So I'd therefore like to confine myself to a few points to, as it were, kick off our discussion. First of all, Putin's revisionism will not prevail. On the contrary, Ukraine is more united than ever. The EU stands unified, and it stands behind Ukraine's future EU membership. NATO is growing. It is gaining new members. And at the same time, thousands of young Russians have paid the ultimate price for Putin's war with their lives, and many others have turned their backs on their country. The Ukrainians are defending their freedom at such high cost and with remarkably impressive resolve. And we are supporting them as comprehensively and as long as is necessary. Germany alone provided more than 12 billion euro to assist Ukraine last year. We've taken in more than 1 million Ukrainian refugees, granting them full access to our labor market, to our schools, to our universities. We're supplying state-of-the-art weaponry, ammunition, and other military goods, more than any other country in continental Europe. That not only meets the, and it has to be said, justified expectations of our partners and allies, we're also assuming the responsibility which a country of Germany's size, location, and economic clout has to shoulder in times such as these. In so doing, we have broken with decades-long principles of German policy. For example, the maxim that we don't supply weapons in a war such as this and in an area such as this. I understand if some people here in Germany are concerned and question our decisions, and I want to say to them that it's not our arms supplies which are prolonging the war. The opposite is true. And that brings me to my second point. The sooner President Putin realizes that he cannot achieve his imperialist objective, the greater the chance that the war will end soon with the withdrawal of Russia's occupying forces. That's also Ukraine's aim, as President Zelensky emphasized at our meetings last week in Paris and Brussels, and he's just reaffirmed it once more just now. We, Europe, as well as the transatlantic and international communities, are firmly united in pursuit of this goal. By the way, this includes documenting and prosecuting war crimes and crimes against humanity committed by Russians in Ukraine. It's good that the Munich Security Conference is addressing this issue, for there can be no lasting peace without justice. At the same time, we're making sure that war doesn't break out between NATO and Russia. My third message is, therefore, we will continue to strike a balance between providing the best possible support for Ukraine and avoiding an unintended escalation. And I'm pleased and grateful that President Biden and many other allies share this view. After all, the path we've embarked upon together runs through uncharted territory. For the first time in our history, a nuclear power is waging an imperialist war of aggression here on European soil, and there's no blueprint for that, for what we need to do in such a situation. I believe we would do well to carefully weigh up all the consequences of our actions and closely coordinate all key steps among the allies. For this is a war in our neighborhood, in Europe, a dangerous war. And despite all the pressure to take action, and that undoubtedly exists, in this key question, caution must take priority over hasty decisions and unity over going it alone, over solo actions. And from the outset, we have to provide our support in such a way that it can be continued for a prolonged period. To date, any decision we've made on supplying new weapon systems has been taken on that premise, in the case of howitzers and multiple launch rocket systems, in the case of air defense weapons, armored infantry fighting vehicles, Patriot missile batteries, and most recently, Western battle tanks. And we will continue to decide on that basis in future. That also means that all those who can supply battle tanks of this kind should now actually do so. Defense Minister Pistorius, Foreign Minister Baerbock, and myself are canvassing intensively for this, and we will do so again here in Munich. Germany will do everything it can to make this decision easier for our partners, for instance, by training Ukrainian soldiers here in Germany or providing support in terms of supplies and logistics. By the way, I see this as an example of the kind of leadership which everyone is entitled to expect from Germany, and I expressly offer it to our friends and partners. And that brings me to my fourth message. Germany is committed to living up to its responsibility for Europe's security and that of NATO allied territory without any ifs or buts. In previous years, it has often been said from this platform that Germany has to live up to its responsibility in the security policy sphere, and I share this view. I not only share it, we will indeed fulfill our responsibility by providing an additional brigade to protect Lithuania, by assisting Poland and Slovakia with air defense and air policing, by protecting critical infrastructure in the North and Baltic Seas, and by leading NATO's Very High Readiness Joint Task Force and keeping 17,000 troops on standby to that end. In order to accomplish that and more in the future, we are putting an end to the neglect of the Bundeswehr. We've laid the foundation for this by creating the special fund of 100 billion euro for our armed forces. To realize this, we amended the basic law with the support of our country's largest opposition party. This fund allows us to finally change gear in terms of building up our Bundeswehr's capabilities. Of course, the new combat aircraft, helicopters, ships and tanks will result in an increase in expenditure on ammunition, equipment, maintenance, exercises, training and personnel. And I therefore want to take this opportunity to reaffirm what I said in the Bundestag 3 days after the war began. Germany will increase its defense expenditure to 2% of gross domestic product on a permanent basis. In order to invest this funding in a meaningful and sustainable manner, we need a high-performing, competitive arms industry in Germany and in Europe as a whole. Therefore, my fifth point is the European Union must pull together strategically when it comes to arms policy. We must all work in the same direction. We're developing the future combat air system together with France and Spain, and the main ground combat system with France. And we're also making progress in the joint development of European capabilities. One example of this is the European Sky Shield initiative proposed by Germany, which is intended to strengthen Europe's air defense within the NATO framework. These are steps towards a Europe of defense and armament, as I outlined last year at Charles University in Prague. They are also steps towards a Europe more capable of taking action in geopolitical terms, towards a Europe which is also stronger and as an ally in the transatlantic alliance. That also means doing more to resolve conflicts in our neighborhood. This is the purpose of the European proposal initiated by President Macron and myself on an agreement between Serbia and Kosovo. And I hope that Belgrade and Pristina will grasp this historic opportunity in the interest of stability in the Western Balkans and throughout Europe. Further steps must be taken to consolidate a geopolitical Europe. After all, security cannot be achieved through military strength alone in our digital, technological, and globalized world. And that's why my sixth point is, for us Europeans, and I'm ultimately talking about all open and democratic societies like our own, it's absolutely crucial that we become more resilient overall. That will not be achieved by deglobalization, not by turning our backs on the world. That would indeed be a betrayal of our own values, as well as an ill-advised decision economically. Rather, it can only be achieved by ending one-sided, risky dependencies and making our political and economic relations broader and more robust. We Germans know what we're talking about. After all, we in Germany ended our dependency on Russian energy during the course of the last 12 months. That required a huge effort. We will reduce such critical dependencies in other areas too, for example, with regard to strategically important raw materials or cutting-edge technologies. Incidentally, I believe this goal, too, should be included in our new national security strategy. We're already strengthening our own production capacities, for example, for semiconductors. We're already diversifying our supply chains and gaining new supplies and markets in the Asia-Pacific region, in Africa, in Central and South America. At the same time, this is also always about granting these regions a greater political say. Indeed, it's about demanding this say. For it's also in their interest that fundamental principles of our peaceful order and of the UN Charter are not trampled underfoot. By the way, that was one of the reasons I traveled to Beijing last autumn. All countries are called upon to defend certain fundamental principles of the international order, including China. And I'm glad that President Xi made it clear on that occasion that he is firmly opposed to any threat to deploy nuclear weapons, and most certainly to their actual deployment in Russia's war against Ukraine. At the same time, and under no illusions about what we can achieve through dialogue alone, also among our democratic partners in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Europa muss aus der Vorstellung herauskommen, dass die Probleme Europas auch die Probleme der Welt sind. Aber die Probleme der Welt sind nicht Europas Probleme. This quote from the Indian foreign minister is included in this year's Munich Security Report. And he has a point. It wouldn't be Europe's problem alone if the law of the strong were to assert itself in international relations. However, to be credible as a European or North American in Jakarta, New Delhi, Pretoria, Santiago de Chile, Brasilia, Singapore, and to achieve something, it's not enough to emphasize our shared values. We have to generally address the interests and concerns of these countries as a basic prerequisite for joint action. And that's why it was so important to me to not merely have representatives of Asia, Africa, and Latin America at the negotiating table during the G7 summit last June. I really wanted to work with these regions to find solutions to the main challenges they face, growing poverty and hunger, partly as a consequence of Russia's war, as well as the impact of climate change or the COVID-19 pandemic. And that brings me to my seventh and final point. If the multipolar world of the 21st century is to have an order which is based on justice and penalizes injustices, then we need new forms of international solidarity and new ways of enabling countries to have their say. The Munich Security Conference has also recognized this, Mr. Heusken. It seeks an exchange of ideas with all countries which share our interest in a world where power is bound by rules, which is not revisionist. That's what I'm calling for, and it's what I'm working to achieve. And I'm glad that many of you are at my side. And now, I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Chief International Anchor of CNN, Christiane Amanpour.
Thank you. Mr. Chancellor, this time last year, I had the privilege of sitting here with President Zelensky. The United States had told him, maybe you shouldn't leave your country because something might happen. But he came here anyway to say that our fight is your fight, as he did again. Many nations here, with the exception of the US and the UK, did not believe in the intelligence that Vladimir Putin would in fact invade. And then 3 days later it did. You heard President Zelensky just say this must be over this year. Do you share that belief that it can and must be?
I think this is really a very brutal war. It is the imperialistic approach of Russia to conquer the whole Ukraine still, or big parts of it. And he is doing this with very much furor, with a lot of brutal impact on the soil of the Ukraine. And many people suffer from that, dying men, women, children, and young and old people. And this is what we should know. So this is what we can do now facing the situation, and that is giving the best support we can. And this is why Germany enlarged constantly its capacity of support for the Ukraine. And we did so with the effect that now we can say that Germany is the biggest supplier also of weapons to Ukraine in continental Europe, and we will continue to be there.
Mm-hmm. But you in your speech said we have to be ready for the long haul. I mean, you must strategize, you must think amongst yourselves how long this could last. Do you have a target date?
I think it is wise to be prepared for a long war, and it is wise to give Putin the message that we are ready to stay all the time together with Ukraine and that we will constantly support the country. So it is not really a very good idea that in this conference or at this podium the two of us discuss the question when exactly in which months this war will end. The really important decision we should take all together is saying that we are willing to do it as long as necessary and that we will do our best.
Do you believe that NATO your allies will stay united? And do you believe that your people will stay behind you and behind this effort?
Yes. First, I'm absolutely sure that Putin never expected that there would be a that united Europe and that there would be a that united world. He never thought that the transatlantic partnership would work that good, but also he never thought that there would be so much support for Ukraine from many other countries all over the globe. And he never expected that there would be a majority of people voting in the General Assembly saying that this is a war of aggression that could not be accepted. And he never expected that even in the G20 meeting we had a very strict sentence about this war and the Russian aggression, and an absolutely clear sentence that nuclear weapons should not be used in this war. So the unity is someone he never expected, and it is our task but also our chance that we stick to it. I'm absolutely sure that we will. And looking at the situation in my country, I see that there is a broad support for the strategy and activities of the government. Yes, there are some, and we are a democratic country, that are not that sure whether it is really a good idea to do all these sanctions and to deploy all these many weapons to Ukraine. But even the big majority of those is in the end accepting that the government has to take a responsible decision and trust us in doing what we do. And even those who possibly sometimes think we should do something more really understand that it is very good that we stick together, that we never go alone, and that we just do it together with our friends and partners, and especially with the United States. And this is why I'm also sure that we will have the support of our people for the things we are having to do.
Obviously, one can't put a date on the end. However, it does depend, I suppose, on the amount of help that you send and the speed with which you send it. So no point in going over the length of time it took to get the Leopard tanks, and for you to say that, the sort of choreography between the UK, US, and Germany. But now you seem to be in the position of having to persuade all those other countries that were trying to get you to send the Leopards, or let their Leopards, to actually send them. Why?
Yeah. There is a question I have to ask to others, especially those who were so much urging me to act in a special way. And I will just repeat, the only strategy for being united is never doing something just for your own, and to discuss with your friends and partners, and this is what we did. And I'm really appreciating very much the strong alliance with the United States in this case. It is very good that we did a lot, and not just the last step, together. And I'm sure we will continue to be together in this very difficult case.
When will they get there? When will the tanks get there, yours and the others?
So we are working, the Minister of Defense is here, he's working very hard to make it happen, and the industry is doing the same, so that we are able to deploy the first Leopard tanks very soon, and also with trained soldiers. This is what we already started. And we are doing so also in giving training and support for all the maintenance which is necessary, and ammunition to other parties that will join. And as I learned, many are not able to deliver the most modern tanks, which we do. I hope some more will join also in this case. But in the ones they are delivering, we will give this support as well. And as you know, there is also a big number of older tanks which we will deliver. And so this is all together what we can do. It's part of our joint activity, and I'm sure that in the end it has a concrete military effect. But the most important effect in this case is that Putin learns that it is a miscalculation if he thinks he can just stick to this course as long as necessary, and then we will stop our support. This will not happen.
Chancellor, There's also some worrying information or reality about your own and generally NATO's ammunition stockpiles. Secretary General said this week that what used to take 12 or so months to order and produce is now taking 28 months. Is that a worry? I mean, they are using a huge amount of shells, obviously, but how can you continue to prosecute this war if you're running out of ammunition and the production has not yet ramped up?
First, I discuss very often with Jens and also with Boris, the defense minister in Germany, and my foreign minister, Annalena, that we have to change the way of dealing with the industry. So in the last years, more and more, we thought that the relation between the public defense department and the industry is something very similar to a company that is buying a car. So there is always a stock of cars, there's a permanent production, there is always what you need for maintenance. The way we did it in the past, in the last 20 years or so, is that we once ordered and we agreed that the production is stopping because we have already bought what we need. So we have to understand that for our security, we have to change the way of dealing this fact. We need a permanent production of the most important weapons we are using, and this is also due to maintenance questions, and this is also due to the question of munition. And so this is what we are learning, but learning it means that we are now taking action in case of our own defense capabilities, but also doing it in supporting Ukraine. So you already may have heard that though this is a weapon that has not been used and produced for, I think, 20 or 30 years, we are now producing again the munition for the Gepard flak tank, which is very essential in defending Ukraine from missiles and other things, and it is something which we are starting so that there is a constant supply. We also discuss what we can do for achieving the chance that the munition that works with the tanks that are in use in Ukraine, mostly of Eastern and Russian origin, could also be continued. And there are a lot, and I see them, of our Eastern partners who could be very good partners in creating the production in this case. Okay. So we are willing to do our best that a permanent supply is feasible.
Part of this conference is also, as it was announced, to include the Global South and actually to try to change public opinion and opinion amongst the leadership. You were just in Brazil talking to President Lula. You asked for ammunition for the Gepard tank. I also interviewed him in Washington when he visited President Biden. And he said, no, not doing it. Don't believe in it. Don't believe in what you're doing. How are you going to convince the rest of the world to come on board with what you call a war for international and global values and the rule of law?
So first, I think that this is the last moment for what Putin always is calling the global West, to have a very good and much better relationship to many countries in Asia, Africa, and the South of America. I'm completely convinced that if we look from the world from the perspective of 2050, it will be a different world with many powerful nations in Asia, in Africa, and the South of America. And this is obviously Indonesia and India, if you look to Asia, but also our good friends we already have in Japan and in Korea, but look at Vietnam, look at Malaysia, look at the Philippines, look at Thailand. There are many countries that could be good partners for us if we are dealing with them, and this is what we should do. And this is the same with Africa. I just want to repeat that it's very good that we have a good relation with South African Republic, that we have a good discussion with Senegal as the leading country of the African Union today. But I would just remember you that Nigeria will have, as some people are telling us, 500 million inhabitants in the midst or near the midst of this century. And if we go to the south of America, with Brazil, with Mexico, with many other countries there, they will be strong. And they will not accept that a country, even a country coming up now, will give them advice. This will be definitely a multipolar world. And the task we have today is to make very sure that this multipolar world is not a world which is not accepting the rule of law in the relation between countries, that revisionism is never accepted, which is what Putin is doing, and that we have, though we do not all agree on the way of governing our countries, agree that the habeas corpus, the integrity of a person, is something that is also accepted by those countries who are not democracies, like, for instance, Germany or France or UK or the United States. And this is the one thing we have to do. And this is why I invited many of them to this Elmau meeting in G7 in Germany. And this is why I think that we should not underestimate the situation. It was Brazil, it was South Africa, it was Argentina, it was Indonesia, it was India, and many others that made it feasible that we had that strong decision in G20 saying that this is an aggression and saying that nuclear bombs should not be used in this war. And we have them as partners, those who already decided on the General Assembly together with us, but also those who did not haven't done this, but who are absolutely clear about the aggression. And just, you mentioned Brazil, Lula was and is absolutely clear, saying this is an imperialistic aggression by Russia and nothing else.
Yeah, but he also gives a little, he also says it takes two to tango, and he puts some of that blame on Zelensky. In any event, let's move on, because we're going to get some questions in a moment. But first, the tanks were like, no, yes. Are the planes going to be no, yes? And what are you going to talk to President Biden about when you go to Washington to meet him soon?
So we have a very good friendship, and it is not that we have public debates, but we have a lot of debates where we work on the questions on the table. And it is something that only works if we do not tell you before what we will do, and afterwards possibly also not all. So we have to do something and have to deal with some questions. And as you know, I think some questions before you asked me, you were deciding to send combat tanks. What? And now you have to convince others. But though you did this, you now ask me about another question which is not on the table, which is not on the agenda, where there's no need for discussing it. I think we will have to do a lot for making feasible that now a broad support for the things we already delivered for the battlefield on the ground, and which will be important, and we will continue to do more of what we already did and to get many countries joining us.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chancellor. And apparently we don't have any time for questions. Sorry, but it's moving a little bit faster than I imagined, or slower. And President Macron's coming up next. Thank you.
You're watching BR24 live, covering this year's Munich Security Conference. And that has been quite the opening, and we will talk about it. Rest assured, our experts are at hand, but there is a lot on the agenda today, with, coming up next, for example, France in the World, with Emmanuel Macron, President of the French Republic. So stay tuned, this will start momentarily.
Please remain seated. Ladies and gentlemen, the program will continue momentarily. Please remain seated. Ladies and gentlemen, the program will continue momentarily. Please remain seated.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Please follow the model of the President of Montenegro, who is sitting. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor and pleasure to announce the President of the French Republic. It's wonderful to have him here. The President has been a regular guest of the Munich Security Conference. He was here as advisor to President Hollande. He was here later on as minister. He was here as president. He was here in 2020, and he was here in 2021 virtually. I'm very, very happy that you came to Munich and to tell us about your view of things, and I'm looking forward to our discussion afterwards. Monsieur le Président, c'est à toi.
Mesdames et messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, mesdames et messieurs les ministres, mesdames et messieurs les directrices, directeurs généraux d'organisations internationales, monsieur le secrétaire général, mesdames et messieurs en vos grades et qualités, parce que je ne reconnaîtrai pas tout le monde ni dans la salle ni dans les escaliers. Je sais qu'il y a aussi beaucoup de parlementaires, de chefs
Unfortunately, I
d'entreprise. Merci
cannot
d'être là.
welcome each and every one of you here in the room. There's company representatives here, Christoph Heusgen, head of the MSC. Esteemed friends, I'm very happy that we can get together here today in this spot where for the past 60 years, I believe it is now, discussions have been held that structure our world. Discussions that have led to new considerations in the transatlantic bond. Today, we heard from President Zelensky and from Federal Chancellor Scholz, my previous speakers, and now I have to say that, speaking after them, that it is very apparent that the situation is very serious. Almost a year has passed since the catastrophic war of aggression was launched by Russia in Ukraine. And even though the time for conclusions has not yet come, I think we should look ahead anyway, or maybe take stock in a certain way. Of course, in my deliberations today, I would like to focus on the war Russia is waging in Ukraine. But at the same time, we must not forget that there are other wars that are being waged in the Middle East, in the Caucasus region. There is a war going on against terrorism, questions of nuclear issues are important as well, but of course today Ukraine is at the heart of the matter. After 1 year, taking stock leads to a very grave result after this catastrophic conflict, and I think I want to highlight one major point today. This war, as opposed to everything we read today, is not only a war of the Europeans, it's a war that concerns the world as a whole, because there is no justification at all for this aggression. I said this a few months ago already when I spoke at the United Nations. I said that this is a neo-imperialist attitude that we see, that is expressed in this aggression towards a neighbor of which you believe you must not respect their entire territory, and that there is a law that needs to be, a right that needs to be claimed. So the assumption that neo-colonialism and neo-imperialism were legitimate in this world. And secondly, all taboos were broken through this war of aggression. Not only the Charter of the United Nations was violated, no. It was violated by a member state of the Security Council. There has been systematic destruction of critical infrastructure, civilian infrastructure. Crimes were committed against the Ukrainian population, against civilians, and a nuclear threat is in the room as well. And the work done by Mr. Grossi at the EAA is also hugely important, and I would like to value that and appreciate that here. And he's also worked great with Iran. We must not underestimate that. So this war has had devastating consequences, and Russia only is responsible for this crisis. A crisis also of food supply, for example, despite the measures that we have taken in solidarity to the benefit of the countries that require our protection the most. Those who believe that this is a European matter, well, to those I say there's only one aggressor and only one party that was attacked. This is clear, and we must not want a stable international organization structure without stepping up for it. And my second consideration is this. It is the case that Russia's aggression has basically been crowned by 4 clear defeats. The first defeat is the defeat on the battlefield. The basic assumption of Russia was that this war was going to be quick, that Ukraine cannot resist and will fall within a few days or maybe within a few weeks at most, and that the matter was settled. The incredible bravery of the Ukrainian armed forces and the Ukrainian people, of the political leadership in Ukraine especially, and also of those friends who are here today, including the president that we've seen on screen earlier, those that have shown this bravery thwarted this plan. The north couldn't be taken, and then we saw what happened in Kherson. You know, we all remember this, and all this is a defeat of the original military plan of Russia. The second defeat is the defeat of the colonial mentality. So the point was to create confusion, to also create spheres of influence, and to act as though there was a legitimacy for this war of aggression. But that did not work out. Even a year later, this hasn't worked out. So what this is about is to explain that Russia is a power today that creates imbalances and injustices, not only in Ukraine or in the Caucasus or in Africa with the Wagner Group. We have seen this over the past few years. We have seen how Russia proceeds, and I talked to President Putin about a year ago, and back then I believed him in a way when he told me that the Wagner Group doesn't belong to him. But now these troops, this group is now official, quote unquote, and it's been a direct military means or tool or even a diplomatic tool that Russia is employing. It's a neo-mafiosi tool that Russia is using everywhere, and it is used to create crimes and commit crimes and create injustice. And the third defeat is a defeat, let's say a defeat looking into the future, because the result is a consolidation of Ukraine and its forces and the decision by Sweden and Finland to join NATO. And I would like to tell the representatives here how much we support them, the representatives of these countries. We want more international cooperation. There is a lot of mistrust towards Russia that has taken root, and self-defense has become more important. But now in the Caucasus, how can we assume that the challenge there can be solved by Russia, by a state that is so neo-colonial in its behavior? I was reassured by the president there that this is not the path to go down. And the fourth defeat concerns me. President Putin wanted to give Russia what supposedly it wanted, which is a claim in the world. So how could Russia be happy with just being an exporter of raw materials and not being a nation that is important in the world? How can Russia just be a medium-sized power that causes mistrust from all its neighbors? But that is now what the situation is. 2 years ago, I shared this exact view here. Nobody can change the geography of Russia. Russia will always remain a part of Europe, geographically speaking, and nobody here in this room can solve this dilemma that there is no complete and long-term peace in our continent as long as the Russian matter has not been solved in a reasonable fashion and without complacency. But we have to continue in this spirit, and we have to take this seriously. And this is what I have been underlining time and again. Once the conflict had started, we must not be naive, show unity, act vigorously, and pursue dialogue as well, wherever it is possible. But at the moment, the hour of dialogue hasn't come yet because Russia chose war. Russia chose to even intensify this war. Russia has decided to attack civilian infrastructure and to commit war crimes. For the short term, the solution is simple. Russia must not and cannot win this war, and Russia's attack must fail. We must not allow that resorting to force or violence becomes normalized, because that puts into question stability in the world. And this is why, together with our European and American partners and many others across the globe, we have, since the beginning of the conflict, created outposts of security. We have imposed sanctions, 10 packages worth of sanctions that we have imposed on Russia. And we have provided humanitarian and financial and economic support to Ukraine, to the people of Ukraine, and we also protected civilian infrastructure in Ukraine. We provided financial means, and let me thank the Secretary General at this point for everything he's done. And every time France has pursued the path of the greatest value added for Ukraine, for example, by supporting air defense and sending artillery and also training Ukrainian armed forces. At the same time, we also made sure that the Ukrainians can be protected, but also Romania and Estonia, for example. We are helping to strengthen and bolster the defense of the eastern flank of NATO. But also we're present in the Mediterranean Sea, and we have joint maritime groups there too. And that, as a matter of fact, since the first days of the conflict. Also, there was always the question whether this conflict would spread into Romanian territory. But over time and again, we have worked towards agreement, basically. And this is my conviction. We need to intensify our support further, to undertake more efforts, increase our effort in order to help the Ukrainian people so that Ukraine itself can launch a counter-offensive, in order to then, under credible circumstances, enter into a negotiation process chosen by Ukraine. We are ready to intensify our efforts. The next few months and weeks will be decisive. But at the same time, we also stand ready to sustain a longer conflict. I don't wish for that. Nobody does, of course. But together, we have to remain credible. We have to remain credible in our perseverance. And this is what France wants to highlight once again today. Unity and determination are important to provide Ukraine with the means to go back to the negotiation table in an acceptable fashion and to work on long-term peace under conditions that the Ukrainians have decided upon and identified. And in this context, I would like to call on all our European friends today. Based on the convictions that I've just shared with you, my first call on you, my first appeal to you is this. We need to invest more in defense. If we want peace, we need the means to achieve it. France, in this regard, is putting in its fair share. So in November, we passed the strategic compass, and now we are working on a new report for defense for the 24 to 2030 time frame. We will provide a significant number of euros to support those efforts, and we have to do more as allies. But rearming ourselves also means that we need to strengthen the European defense technological and industrial base, and all the means that we have developed recently through the agenda of Versailles a year ago need to be reinforced as well. We need to continue on this path. Also, the Ukrainian armed forces need to be enabled to continue on that path too, including with industrial support from Europe. And if Ukraine is supposed to defend Europe, it needs to be armed accordingly. It needs to be interoperable with Europe, and production capacities need to be ramped up also across Europe. We need an investment program for defense, which is ambitious in all of Europe, so that we can make the best out of the European Defence Fund. We also do have to change, maybe, or think about changing our rhythm. The war industry that we have been wanting to strengthen in France since spring is something where we need more progress. We need more standardization, more simplification at the European level. And my second appeal now is this. We should also consider the nuclear aspect of this matter. There are non-verbalized questions in this war, and nuclear issues are one of those. Nuclear weapons are. Russia's attack took place in the shadow of nuclear weapons, and of course we need to protect our allies. But at the same time, this was also a wake-up call for us. We need to ask ourselves, what role do nuclear weapons play in the EU and in NATO? French deterrence has a very decided spot. Together with the UK, together we are responsible for the security of the alliance. And of course, the Americans play a key role in this regard. And so I wish that once again we underline the nuclear features of our alliance, and that we consider once again what that means. And I would like to repeat what I said in February at the Azdagir, a dialogue with our partners on France's nuclear deterrence, and what Europe derives from that is crucial. And thirdly, I would also like to call on all of us to rethink our security doctrine. Europe should, in all questions of arms control, have its place. I'm thinking of medium-range rockets and missiles. At one of the most recent NATO meetings, I underlined, and you may recall how important those weapons are. The United States has decided to not pursue certain contracts or agreements or treaties further, and they concerned our territory, and we were not involved here. So basically, we were a geopolitical minority, and that needs to end. It is about the security of Europe that is at stake. We need to think about this. We need to provide this type of security, and we need to guarantee it together with our NATO partners, but also as Europeans. The INF treaty was discussed over the past few years, but we were not invited to that, and so there is no treaty anymore like the INF, and we have to draw conclusions from that. That would have an added value also for the European defense posture, and would strengthen our capabilities in defense and reinvigorate them as well, if we had a tool like the INF Treaty again that no longer exists. And that also ties in with a more general topic that Federal Chancellor Scholz just brought up, which is air defense here on the European continent. And I think it was right that President Scholz raised the issue of air defense. We, Germans, British, French, who want to join in this effort, should have a conference on air defense in Europe. We should have a conference on that, including with industry representatives, inviting all those who have solutions to offer here. But also from a strategic point of view, we need to consider this, especially from a strategic point of view. But at the same time, deterrence and effects in the depth need to be considered. This is a central question for Europe. Europe needs to have its place in a future security order. My fourth appeal to you is this. What mechanism could we have that could prevent a cycle of aggression. We need a framework of transparency, of predictability in Europe with simple principles like inviolability of borders, sovereignty of states, the stabilizing role of Europe that we should underline. So we need an architecture that is credible with arms control. And finally, we also need a framework that prevents crises, including long-term crises on the continent. Of course, we can use existing structures like the OSCE, and of course, Europe needs to be at the heart of this. I'm not thinking dogmatically here. There is the EU, yes, but I think we need to think Europe bigger, just as we've done through the European political community that has to play a special role in this regard. Some partners have decided to leave the European Union, but they are a member of the European political community. They are partners in energy and security, and they share so many topics with us. And there are other countries that want to join the European Union, and I hope they will do it. Today, they're quite far from it. I think Norway and the UK, Moldova, Ukraine, this is a European political community that has the opportunity to prevent crises like that and to create the architecture I just outlined. I would like to reassure the President of Moldova of our support once again. She's facing so many challenges and has faced them and mastered them. So we need a space for cooperation on our continent. And NATO plays a very fundamental, a key role here. And the last few months have shown that all those who believed that the strengthening of the European pillar within NATO was a threat for NATO have understood now that this basically strengthened our alliance because, of course, this is just logical to act this way, and that with this we have shown our determination to reach strategic goals together. And now 2 more appeals to our European partners. So my 5th appeal. In addition to the current conflict, we need to pull together in the future when it comes to other conflicts that are a threat to us already now. There is a risk that we're all facing. It's the risk of something that could happen in the next weeks or months, which is more geopolitical shifts. We could potentially see new forms of conflicts in new spaces like the cyberspace or in the maritime sphere. We must not forget the vulnerability of our democracies when it comes to destabilization campaigns and disinformation campaigns. These spheres will be exploited, maybe by Russia, but also maybe by other authoritarian powers that in this context target the destabilization of us. So we have to pool our capacities and our investments and work together more strongly in this area. And now my last appeal to all Europeans, but also everyone beyond Europe, also including the United States, is this. Let's prepare peace. For the short term, we need to be strong and determined, and we need to be willing to persevere. Already now, we need to prepare the conditions for peace. This is our responsibility. But this is not about making bad compromises. No, we need a credible peace, because a credible peace will be durable. But we will have to be prepared and create the conditions for this peace. And that means that we need to work with everyone, let's say in Asia, in the Indo-Pacific, in the Middle East, in Latin America and Africa. We need to be in touch with our partners in those regions who maybe do not fully share our views that I just outlined. And as I said earlier in the beginning, we are often being accused of not speaking the truth, of not being quite honest. You know, you spend so much money on Ukraine. We have faced wars for years, and you never spent any money on us. You know, we need to listen to these concerns. We need to listen to those countries and to those regions and together with those countries from those regions, we need to step up together and exert pressure on Russia and create a long-lasting peace. And so that means, finally, that we have to fight this narrative of double standards. I want to call on the G20 and the G7 to stand by us, to create a partnership of the South and the North in order to strengthen solidarity at the international stage, to the benefit of health, education, the fight of food scarcity, and basically creating more credibility for richer countries and countries that are currently undergoing developments. We need to help those countries. We need to show them how we defend our principles towards a durable and just peace in Ukraine. We want a more fair, a more just world. We want a world that can tackle the challenges of climate change in those countries, but also in other places. But responsibility is indispensable. And in all of that, we must not forget what the responses are to this new geopolitical environment. It also needs to be a military answer. It must be a response of resolve. We need to commit ourselves to a credible peace, to a strengthened and enhanced policy of solidarity. So that was quite a long speech, and I thank you for your attention, and thank you for letting me share with you my convictions today.
Merci beaucoup. Merci. On fait deux questions. Okay. Oui. Okay. Mr. President, thank you very much for your speech. It had an advantage and a disadvantage. The advantage was it was very comprehensive. The disadvantage was we don't have much time for questions, and I will not ask you questions, but I ask the public who didn't get to ask questions to the German Chancellor. So you have a question for two questions for the President. I take the two questions right after another. And the first one doesn't even need to raise his hand. François Eisbourg. Can we get a mic? Short.
Oh, très court. Monsieur le Président, est-ce que vous...
Yeah, just briefly, Mr. President, do you think that there's any chance that there will be a long-lasting peace with Russia? Because you just said Russia will remain a part of Europe always. So if Russia doesn't bury its dreams to create a big empire yet again, just as it happened in France with regards to the war in Algeria, don't you think there is any chance, any shred of hope?
No, we do it. No other question? Yes, there, over, please.
Monsieur le Président, I'm going to speak in English, but in your vision of a new global order and a durable peace, does that include reforming the Security Council to actually give political weight and voice to all these other countries?
Look, I will start with the second question. Yes, definitely. I think we have to reshape our global order. I think first, and for me this is why this is a huge emergency, we have to rebalance our global order and make it more inclusive. And I think I'm very impressed by how much we are losing the trust of the global South. I will be very clear and tough with ourselves. Why? Because for good reasons they felt that this world was quite unbalanced. They felt that during the COVID-19 period of time, even if we did a lot, there was a double standard approach. We committed to do more afterwards. We had a wonderful summit. IMF made a tremendous job, WHO as well, for the Global South. But we committed, but we delivered very slowly. Look at the SDRs. We did it. We pushed very much, but so many countries didn't do so, for good reasons at home, but they didn't see the money. And on top of that, now they are impacted by the consequences of this war. So they just say, when the war is on your territory, is your top priority, you are ready to spend money you have magnitude and speediness, but it's not the same for us. And at the same time, you have an acceleration of their challenges, inequalities, demography, climate change, and direct consequences. So I think for me, the top priority is to restore more solidarity. This is why I do believe this new partnership between South and North is key. And we will organize a conference in June in Paris with all the big international organizations and countries precisely to try to help and accelerate the reform of IMF, World Bank, and so on, but as well reshape the global order and the inclusiveness of the different forums. Part of it, definitely, is the Security Council. Let's be clear. One permanent member just decided to kill the rules of what he was supposed to look for. So we have to reform it and to reshape it. As for this dream of empire and the Russian mindset, I'm convinced that this war, this is not a justification, but an explanation. This war is the consequence of the fact that probably nobody in Europe properly digested the end of the Cold War. Neither the Europeans nor the Russians. We thought ourselves that it was the honeymoon, the end of a wall, and everything could be repaired. Access to the European Union, new democratic standards, and a new global order. You don't change the society and what people experience during decades overnight. And even by the way ourselves as Europeans we approach the consequence of the situation, we probably underestimated the importance of national culture in some countries in Europe, joining the EU. We probably underestimated the in-depth crisis and this time for transition. And we didn't think properly. It was exactly what I advocated a few years ago, but probably I formulated it and I advocated too late, but I was elected in 2017. But the relationship with Russia. And I think in our own approach vis-à-vis Russia, we didn't digest it. But very clearly, I think Russia didn't digest the end of an empire. And I think clearly the deep reason of this aggression is resentment post-1990 and obsession of geopolitical empire. And when you have, look at the situation, an average GDP, a declining demography, you are the biggest country of this world with a lot of borders, especially with China and some good fellows. If you want to fix your future, you need some crazy dreams. So either you have a dream of growth and innovation, the one we could hope, either you have a dream of a new Europe based on peace, innovation, education, and so on, or you resume the old dream of empire based on hegemony and aggression. This is this one. I'm very skeptical about the ability of make a big reset on the short run, and I don't see any signal on that. The question is how, let's be clear, I don't believe one second in a regime change. And when I hear a lot of people advocating for regime change, I would just ask them for which change? Who's next? Who is your leader? How to implement it? And we experienced several times during the past decade a lot of regime change in a lot of countries. It's total failure. So just you have this regime with its obsessions, its people. We want first to help Ukraine to save its territory, its people and sovereignty. And I think the question is how to twist and create an imperfect balance, allowing them to present something sustainable for Russia itself. At the end of the day, it will be something like that. It's too early to formulate it. Now, the question is how to resist, help the Ukrainians to make on the ground something which will force Russia to come back at the table at the conditions of Ukraine. But at a point of time, given the geography, we will have to negotiate. I think in the back of their mind, this regime, these people will have the same dream. The question is how to make the new normal acceptable for them and sustainable for all of us. I think we have some ways, they are quite complicated. Definitely it's not the right time to formulate them, but we have to work on that.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. There are some open questions, so we hope you'll come back next year to respond to these questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, and all the best for our Ukrainian friends.
You're watching BR24 live on this year's Munich Security Conference, and that has been a lot so far, and now we are trying to put some sense into it, mostly his 2 cents. Clemens Fehrenkotte, long-time correspondent for Southeast Europe and Washington, D.C., joining me now live on the ground at Hotel Bayerischer Hof. Clemens, so happy to have you, and let's dive right in. What did you think of Zelensky's statement?
I mean, he was brilliant rhetorically, as he always is, but this time he was able to pronounce all these wishes he has for his country, also in biblical terms. He was saying Ukraine is David, the biblical David, fighting Goliath, and Goliath is Russia. There is no alternative to the other than to defeat Goliath. Then he went also using the same metaphor, saying the sling, I need slings, already got some. He's saying it hasn't been enough, we need a large sling in order to finish this off. He had been here 1 year ago, and he left, it was February, I think was February the 21st, I think, a couple of days prior to the Russian invasion. And he came here just for 1 day. He said, I'm in breakfast in Kiev and I will be at dinner in Kiev. And he had been here. He was saying, by that time, I was asking all these participants, and some, especially countries close to Europe and partners, help us. And there hadn't been a response. Now he was saying this response is almost done. There's lots of support, and he thanked, especially for this support, profoundly.
Christiane Amanpour, with the discussion she had later with Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz, she asked one very good question, in my opinion. With the tanks, she said, it has been a no, 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 yes. Will it be a no, 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 yes, with jets as well? To which Olaf Scholz responded, that's not on the table. But like you said, Zelensky was saying Ukraine is still missing the sling David had to defeat Goliath. So what do you make out of this reaction from the German Chancellor?
I mean, the German Chancellor was pretty clear and a bit also critical of his European partners who are pushing him the weeks ahead for Leopard tanks, and give us a go-ahead. Then finally, together with U.S. President Joe Biden, he was doing this. He was getting his go-ahead with Leopard tanks, and then the result from countries like Poland or the Netherlands was, well, at the moment we don't have any. We will come back to you. Coming back to the question of Christiane Amanpour saying where are the tanks, I think he gave a fairly not only diplomatic but also politically correct answer, was saying in a few weeks. So he wouldn't be a chancellor, not even of Germany, but a responsible chief of government saying, well, they will be delivered at March 21st.
In your article on this year's Munich Security Conference, Clemens, you were saying the European security architecture has been in ruins since the Russian war against Ukraine. Germany and France, or the still maybe cornerstone of Europe, are they reacting accordingly to that?
No, we have to admit they don't. And it's you can follow up this since the beginning of the war till nowadays. Also, we just listened to the French President Emmanuel Macron prior to the German Chancellor, and there had been differences. I'll give you some example. For example, the German Chancellor was saying, well, we have really to support Ukraine as long as it takes. Putin's imperialism is bound to be defeated. The French president saying basically one sentence I haven't heard since the whole afternoon. He was saying we have to prepare for peace. Then probably everywhere was saying, what peace? And he was, for sure, we all listened in when you have listened to the program, saying, yeah, but it's not now the time, but we have to prepare. So he was reaching out. In terms of military, financial support, Germany is way ahead of France. And going basically to tanks, they have the Leopard tanks. There are not any in production any longer in France. So there isn't anything which I can put on the table right now. In terms of differences, in terms of money, in terms of financial, political, and military support, I think it's a disbalance between Berlin and Paris.
As I can see in my monitor, we still have a little bit of time left. So Clemens, let me take you one step back to the beginning of the Munich Security Conference. Chairman Heusgen, he said, let's hope that Putin is impressed by the unity at the Munich Security Conference. First off, do you think Moscow is watching? And second off, do you think Putin will be impressed by what he has seen so far?
Well, first of all, the Russians are obviously